Kichiro Toyama, a legend in the video game field, but also a legend that some people may not recognize for some odd reason. I mean, he was only the creator of Silent Hill. You know, one of the best horror franchises in the industry. But he also has some cult hits, Siren and Gravity Rush, which is one of the most overlooked franchises, and I will fight anyone that says it's not worth another game in the series, including PlayStation themselves. Seriously, I'll do it if that means Gravity Rush 3. But even I ended up overlooking his work. Thanks to some comments on the 2024 Overlooked Games of the Year video, a viewer suggested that I take a look at Slitterhead, which released on November 8th, 2024 for the price of $49.99. And I was going to for last year's video, but I just ran out of time. And the game seems polarizing from what I see in the community. I mean, there's people calling it the worst game of the year. And look, I don't want to call other people out, but buddy, if you say this is one of the worst games you've ever played, I don't mean to be standoffish, but you don't know what a bad game is. But I admit, Slitterhead is not a game for everyone. Hell, there's a part of me that does wonder if I were to be in the wrong mood when I played the game, that I would have a lot less favorable view of the game than I do. A lot of people actually are going to have a huge varied reaction to the game, and I think that is going to have something to do with the game and the price you obtain it at. But I want to make something clear. I think this game is going to be another one of those games that we will look back at with the same cult following as a game like Siren. And I'm going to explain why, and why you may want to wait to play it. Confusing? Yep, that is exactly what you should expect from Slitterhead. So, where to begin? I guess I'll start with the story. If you're looking for a straightforward horror plot, you need to look somewhere else. I mean, I mentioned Silent Hill in the opening, and even that is a lot more straightforward than what you've got here in terms of storytelling. Part of it has to do with the mechanics that Toyama and his team uses from a storytelling perspective, but more of that in a bit. Let me get to the basics first. You play as Night Owl, who is a Hokai, which is basically an entity that doesn't have a physical body or past memories when they came to be. Now, there's obviously some parallels with other Asian entities right away here, those like the Japanese yokai. I mean, you can hear it in the pronunciation. But from what I see, the game actually seems to be based in a Hong Kong-like setting, thanks to the maps shown in game and the structures that are built and used here. Everything feeling cramped and claustrophobic, very similar to what I see in Hong Kong architecture. Regardless, you don't actually know what a Hokai is at first. All you really know is that you have one singular focus: to eliminate the demonic-like beings known as Slitterheads. Now you may ask what a Slitterhead is. Well, let me show you. Why do I feel... Yep. Well, that seems like a problem. As to what exactly they are, like Night Owl, that's very unclear at first. In fact, a lot of everything in the game is very unclear in the first several chapters, but that's sort of the draw here. This is going for a mystery element that puts you in the detective-like role while playing as the protagonist, trying to unearth clues to find out what's truly going on here. And it really does well to stimulate your paranoid and imaginative side when it comes to the possibilities the story lays out, doing enough to give you pieces of information that are substantial while allowing for the imagination to fill the gaps until your next big piece of information. Now, as Night Owl, your primary ability to deal with the Slitterheads is to possess humans. which you take over their body, and you use blood powers to fight. Yes, blood powers. Think the weapons that Power creates in Chainsaw Man, a series that I'll watch one of these days. However, there are special humans that you resonate with, which are called rarities. These humans get even more special abilities and allow you to have a symbiotic relationship more than a parasitic one. They exist with you as opposed to you just sort of taking them over. The two main ones are Julie, a young girl who was attacked and almost killed before you intervened, and Alex, a mysterious doctor who seems to already know about the Slitterheads before you have a chance to meet. Now, there is a good collection of characters here that are rarities and provide some good backstories to work off of, such as Anita, a courtesan-like character to a criminal organization, or Try, the old housewife who seems to be more capable than she lets on. In fact, there's only one character I didn't really like of the main cast in terms of adding value to the story, and that's Blake. Listen, he has interesting elements about him, but it feels like he had a lot more potential that doesn't get used. What I wanted a little bit more of was interactions between the different rarities that played to them specifically, showing off their personalities and not just being about the main plot. A prime example of this is the clip that you see on screen between Anita and Donnie here. It shows layers of Anita and her profession while showing Donnie's assumptions, and really is a charming interaction between them in the end. Characters are the spice in terms of storytelling. They are the ones that you're going to remember more than anything else. And with the right combination, it can absolutely take the story to the next level. And Anita and Donnie is the prime example here. I just wish that it had more interactions between them and between the rest of the cast. With that said, I'm adding this at the last minute. It seems like it could be dependent on exactly what characters you use in what mission and in what combination, because when I was getting a little bit more footage, I ended up unlocking what seemingly was more interactions between the characters, which I found interesting because I hadn't tried every combination of characters. I tried to use gameplay in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, and obviously it wanted you to experiment a little bit more, so that's interesting. Sorry for the last minute addition. Now, remember I said that this plot isn't straightforward. And yeah, that's 100% the case here. And part of what took this review so long to release is that I struggled with the story section for a good reason. A lot of the story and the different mechanics that are used, I would consider to be spoilers in of itself to discuss. And I will say this, it was nice to come across a Steam store page that didn't spoil those mechanics in its description and in its trailer. In the age where big points of a movie, especially in the horror genre, are spoiled in that trailer, it was a breath of fresh air. But with that said, how do I discuss these mechanics and how they play writing-wise without actually discussing them in terms of that specific detail? With analogies and comparisons that are close but not exactly 100% on. The story has similarities to things like Zero Escape and Danganronpa, specifically with decisions being made getting recontextualized or a new truth being discovered with more information that forces the characters to react to them and reevaluate their positions. Which you can call those twists or whatnot, but I think Slitterhead does a very good job of setting up so-called twists to not really be twists, but more clarification. The clues are there if you look, especially early on, but it's very easy to get lost in the detail of everything going around and go down the wrong rabbit hole. I also like the fact that the game does a very good job of being political, yet not. What I mean by that is some media and games are a little heavy-handed when it comes to the comparisons that they are making and what they want you to take from them. A prime example of this, in my opinion, is the new Devil May Cry Netflix series, which is a little heavy-handed in the view of American politics and power, even if I do agree with some of the points that it makes. It's a little bit on the nose. Meanwhile, I think that Slitterhead does a good job of presenting points of view and different ways of handling situations to make you question things more than telling you that it's wrong. And I think it does that in a way that I found surprisingly universally applicable. Different people will take different things from this game and what it says, especially depending on what characters are in certain scenes. Because yes, you can get a little bit different dialogue. Now, is the story the best written? Not at all. There are moments where I feel certain characters get a little too polarized in terms of their personality, and that their personality gets pulled to 11 in an unnatural way, even with the things that happen to them trying to explain it. Villains in this game in particular can feel a little too unnatural, where you do start to question their logic and values, and that's understanding that this game has a B-movie element to it. But, was I entertained? Absolutely. And I think that's the point. I was entertained to the point where I was enjoying myself and I got the mystery value out of it. I love mystery stories, and I love stories that make me question things. And Slitterhead did both. So for me, the writing was a success. Now, you're probably wanting more information, or if you do know some of the plot points, you probably want more specifics. What I will offer is this. There's a Discord in the description below. Yes, I know, I have a Discord, whoop-de-doo. But I will be willing to answer questions there. Even in the comment section, I may answer it, but I also don't want people to accidentally get spoiled. I think that story is interesting enough that I don't want to take that chance. But if you'll join the Discord, I'll answer all your questions. So now that I've confused you with the insanity of the story, you're probably wondering if the gameplay is as insane as that. And while it doesn't hit that level, it's still got a unique element that definitely makes it stand out in a way or two, and reminds me of an Angry Joe video of all things. The gameplay is broken into missions, which usually focus on defeating a Slitterhead or discovering a truth that you didn't know up to that point, which usually comes from defeating a Slitterhead. Not to say that the gameplay is just combat, mind you, but it is the main element at the core, so we'll start here. When you take control of a regular human, you have the ability to do regular physical attacks, and a small 3-hit combo associated with it. There's nothing too crazy from the basic attack here, and there's not a lot of variety when it comes to it. You can't change up your button presses, you can't, time things to be a little bit different, which is one thing that hurts the gameplay in the long run, because you'll be using regular humans a lot. You have the ability to dodge to get away from enemy attacks, and the ability to guard yourself to block against some damage. However, if you block in the direction that you're being attacked at the right time with the analog stick on the right, you'll parry the blow, allowing you to get some strong hits in, and also building meter that can activate a period of slow-mo damage, similar to Witch Time in Bayonetta. You also have some skills you can use, but I'll get to that in a second, because I want to highlight what the difference between regular humans you possess are and rarities. See, while most humans fight in the same way, aka with a blood mace, rarities will have specific weapons and elements that will open up new avenues of fighting or special properties to them. For example, Donnie uses a spear and gets the ability to do an overhead flip attack and a more vertical sweeping multi-combo attack with directional inputs. Meanwhile, Edo's fists allow you to be more mobile and allows for longer strings of combos. Beyond their unique skills, each of the rarities fight reasonably different, so finding the combinations that work for what you want and their strengths can help you get through particularly difficult scenarios. But of course, there's more unique skills on the characters as well, ranging from being able to throw daggers at the enemies that will poison them, to being able to summon more humans to come to the fight. Each of the rarities have their own unique set of 3 and bring different styles, and can actually transfer over to the humans that fight as well. Now, the range of these skills are all over the place in terms of effectiveness, however. The Time Bomb one, for example, sacrifices a human for some big damage. Seems cool at first, but only is useful with groups of enemies, and even then it doesn't do that much damage to be worth it, especially when enemies are running around and end up running away from your character when the bomb goes off. Meanwhile, I was using the poison daggers a hell of a lot, especially because of the fact that every skill takes some of your health, or at least most of them. And staying away with low health humans and throwing daggers was extremely effective, especially because of the game's central mechanic. That mechanic? Possession. As Night Owl, you can jump from rarity to human based on hitting a button and looking in the direction of the soul you want to take, highlighting it, and then jump to them. If you remember a game called Mindjack, which is probably more infamous because of the Angry Joe video review, it's a similar mechanic in that game, but here it's a lot more effective and interesting to use because of the way the fights are structured. There's no time limit on the use of this skill either. You can literally jump from soul to soul to soul very quickly, with only a few restrictions on it. Basically, you need to be able to see the character you are jumping to in a line of sight, and be a specific distance away. What should be specifically noted is that time slows down when you hit that spirit jump, and if you time it right, you can actually jump out of a human to someone else just as they're about to become a bloodstain on the floor. Which, I should mention, there's two ways that you can fail a mission primarily. One is to lose 3 of what I call souls, basically losing all your health while in the body of one of the rarities and humans you possess, and then, well, do it 2 more times. The other is you have no soul that you can jump into after dying in the current one. Now, you may look at the system and go, well, I guess it's different, but what exactly does this add in terms of play value? I mean, why wouldn't I just use the more powerful rarities in a fight? They seem more fun to play as anyway. Well, the thing that ends up balancing it is the use of blood as a resource to use those skills, and in particular, how you get your blood back. See, when hitting enemies, you can cause blood to spurt out of them and onto the ground. That blood can be used to regenerate your health, but realize that you have to actively hit a button to get that health back. You sort of have to absorb it. So if enemies, who can mob you and recognize where you are pretty quickly when you change souls, you may not be able to easily get that health back if you're staying in one body. Now, if you keep on swapping from soul to soul and keep the pressure up from all angles, you can start to see where things change from that aspect. Knowing when to ditch and when to keep the pressure up even with smaller humans, or when to go all out with rarities, that's where Slitterhead's combat really starts to shine, especially at higher difficulties. I have to emphasize that part. If you are even semi-knowledgeable action or survival horror players, play on the harder difficulties here, and you will get the most out of the combat. When you are jumping from enemy to enemy and keeping a flow up, the game can be very unique and fun in how it plays, like a certain other game in Toyama's history. No, seriously, go play Gravity Rush for Vlad's sake. And yes, I'm using Vlad as a replacement for a swear so the video doesn't get overhit from more adult factors in terms of shareability on YouTube. Where the game, however, shines the most in its combat is not actually the specific battle sequences, but the chase and deception type gameplay. See, Slitterheads can look human, they can blend in, and there are points in the story that you have to determine where a Slitterhead is and expose them. You do have this nice trick where you can see through their eyes thanks to Night Owl's power, and that does lead to an exploration and some tracking gameplay, which, yeah, is very straightforward and isn't exactly the most uncommon technique used, but it's also effective. It's then that point where you expose those characters and then chase them down, where, I'm going to be honest with you, if there is a Slitterhead 2, they really should focus on this part, because this part is freaking fantastic. This is Hong Kong, and there's a lot of different ways to go and people to jump to. Slitterheads will run and reasonably fast, and the fact that you can jump to different characters means that you can use people and the environment around you to get ahead of them. And there's something about looking at a character you're chasing down, getting ahead of them by jumping to another character, and then getting a hit in or two that's really, really satisfying. Or the opposite happens, where they get away and you have to find them again. Or you get caught on something and have to do something you weren't expecting to do. Granted, this chase sequence can be upgraded in a lot of different ways in a sequel, and I really think that if there is a sequel, this should be the focus. Because, yeah, some of the other combat, it has some repetition, even though I think it is undervalued for what it is. But at the same time, this feels a bit unique in terms of what the game could do, especially with the coercion / blending in portion. I think it's very similar to Assassin's Creed multiplayer, if some people remember that, but not entirely. I think that both the chase and the combat complement each other in terms of the gameplay, but I will admit I'm still left wanting a little bit more in the end. It's the fact that even in the big moments like the bosses, a lot of the things that you do are pretty similar in the big picture. Yes, you have different characters, you can fight in different ways, but it doesn't necessarily force you to fight in those different ways, especially at lower difficulties. You can do the same thing over and over again, and I do really wish that the game forced you into situations where, hey, you really need to use the guard a lot more, or use the parry a lot more, or maybe you need to, deal with a high health enemy and you really need that poison. It's just that the game doesn't really put you in a lot of those situations until the very end. And that last one, sort of a dick move, the way that it's handled. Now, in terms of side content, I will admit that they have some here. They have some extra shrines that will give you specific challenges. They will have memories that you can find that may give you a little bit more of the story. Although I did want more in terms of the in-game story. Like, things to collect that tell you a little bit about people that you run across. And the fact is, I ended up wanting more in the overall picture because, especially with extra characters, you do get the old lady, Betty, she's fantastic, by the way. But, with all the different characters you run into, I feel like you could have done a little bit more there. You do have a skill tree that I accidentally ignored for half the game. For some reason in my mind, the grayed out skills were things I thought I had to unlock in the story or something. I sometimes am the dumbest reviewer on the planet. Which means you can play without the skills for the most part when you think about it, just upgrade the base stuff. But there is a good variety to go on all the characters, while there are specific skill upgrades for each character that makes them even more unique. It's a good mixture, and I think it does add to the game, but it isn't required. A lot of my complaints about the gameplay come down to the little things. The things that you would polish over time or tweak with a sequel. For example, I completely forgot that this was a tutorial section when I retried this mission after stopping during my first stream. So, in this mission, I have to use Time Bomb, as it says on the top left there. Well, I didn't for a bit, and was literally wondering why this one Slitterhead wasn't going down. Having the character say something like, I need to channel my Time Bomb, or something to bring attention to that would go a long way. I will also say that despite being out for several months, the game is a bit buggy. The thing is that in this case, the curse portion, it basically would end the mission if I don't succeed. And I end up transferring right as it's about to happen, and the game gets confused. I'm just standing there, can't do anything, to the point where I couldn't even hit the pause menu. So I literally had to Alt F4 the game. Not only this, there were a couple of crashes during the game, and at very specific and what seemed like repeatable points. So yeah, if you're going to play the game, you're going to have some issues. Let's finish off with the game's presentation. The thing is, this is an indie game, but it's also not. I mean, it is $49.99, so with that comes more expectations in graphical fidelity, which it delivers and also doesn't. Now note, I played the game with the following settings you see on screen, so keep that in mind when it comes to the gameplay and the fidelity as a whole. I was streaming the game, so I could have pushed it in other areas, but I didn't for the sake of, well, streaming. I do want to start off with the creature designs, because there's this weird impression I've gotten from some of the negative feedback against the game that these designs aren't scary? And I have to ask something. Have we forgotten about body horror and the influences of the human body being transferred to the creatures that stalk us in the horror genre? Because to me, these designs are very, very well put together in evoking humanity and horror. What I want from horror creatures is things that will make me feel fear or a negative emotion of some sort. And almost every creature in Slitterhead does. These skin tubes that feel like a like grew a set of legs and are running at me. The creature that feels very tongue and mouth influenced, and oh god, it's eating me. Of course, I'm a little off-put with my skin crawling a little when I see it. Do I have any idea why there are openings in this guy's head? Why it's almost rib-like? And why there's a squishy center and that his mouth looks like a seahorse? No, but those questions actually add to the fear of what it could do and what it might have mutated from. Do I want to know what the Vlad this is? No, I don't. I want it dead, and I want it dead now. These creatures serve the game in terms of its presentation. And even though there are times where I do wonder exactly what I'm looking at, that's exactly the point. You're not supposed to know exactly what you're looking at first. Now, a little tangent here. I will admit, sometimes the game is a little heavy-handed in that aspect when it comes to the design influence. And I'm specifically talking about the bosses here. Like, look, I'm glad that people can learn that the influence of this creature design is a scorpionfish. Scorpionfish are pretty rad looking. But did you really need to put that in the boss description, in the name? Sometimes not saying the exact thing at first glance, and then maybe finding it out when looking through a codex or a journal entry would be a little bit more impactful. It just doesn't seem like it's doing what you want it to do here. Maybe it's just me. There's reasonable detail in the environment and the characters without being too intensive to take your attention away from what you need to truly focus on, the action. But when you do have a chance to focus on the little things, you can see some good shading work, in particular with the crumbling cement walls here in the building. Lighting in particular does a great job of pushing focus on particular game elements, such as shadows of creatures for set pieces and levels. Now, there are times where I do question some of the effects that are used in terms of looking nice, like the poison one. I can always see it, however, which is a plus, and poison shouldn't necessarily be nice to look at, but it just feels like it could be done a little bit better. Where the presentation starts to stumble for me a little bit is when it can feel a little inconsistent or a little haphazard in terms of the visuals, which, yes, isn't necessarily uncommon for horror games at times, especially those influenced by B-movies, but here it did take me out of the immersion at times. I want to focus on one of these scenes where we take over a rarity for the first time, because it hits the gambit here of pros and cons. Like, I love the use of the glow in the blood vessels within the body and the glow of the red eyes when you first take over Anita here. It puts the central element as the blood, and as Night Owl, you're taking control via that blood. It makes sense. But then there's the yellow glow that I can only describe as Dragon Ball Z in terms of aura and the Kai that comes off a character who screams for like 20 minutes. It just doesn't match the situation for me and feels a little bit, well, over the top in a bad way. As to sound design, a fun Dragnix fact for you. My hearing is probably damaged from working too close to an alarm that I did some software with in my 20s. Do I probably need to go to a specialist for that? Absolutely. But I bring this up because I legitimately wonder if it plays a part in my perception of this sound design in particular. Because when I hear the individual sound elements here, they sound reasonable. Whether it's the sound of throwing blood daggers at someone, or the splash of blood I would expect with all the blood running around. Each sounds of reasonable quality, And the voices and the grunts that happen do really add to things, especially during cutscenes where Night Owl seems to be murmuring to himself. But when they start to overlap with each other, more than any other recent game that I can think of, they start to really mess with each other to me, where I'm having trouble making things out. Like, I can't hear the screech clearly of something that's going to hit me, and I feel like at times, some of the yells and vocal audio is moved down volume-wise when other sounds play. It's strange hearing it back now as I'm editing, as I don't remember it being a problem when streaming it. But after replaying a part or two, and it still seeming to happen, maybe I'm crazy. Or, look, just listen and hear what I'm talking about. Maybe. Finally, let's talk about the music. It's alright. There are haunting melodies that help to emphasize the mystery and dark nature of the creatures you run across, and some of the vocal tracks that are in the game do well in terms of the quality of the music and the performance, I guess, but it's not anything that I would compare to the best in the horror genre. It sets the right atmosphere and does well in complementing the visuals. Anyway, here's a selection of the music in-game. Take a listen and hear what I'm referring to. To wrap up the presentation, what I will say is that the B-movie element that I made a comparison to definitely hits this game on more than one front. Towards the beginning of the game, there's a lot more cutscenes and focus that are put on individual moments in-engine rather than the cutscenes, and it's almost like the budget started to run out towards the end of the game where you saw it less, like it was just trying to glue things together. But beyond that, there are moments in this game that will get you laughing at the absurdity of what you just witnessed. And some of that will be on you. Sure, it doesn't matter which character you are when you come across this ridiculous set of legs out of the dumpster. But at certain scenes, you will get the cutscene with the character you are playing as. And it can lead to a moment where a middle-aged bald man is facing this huge demon, or having an elderly lady who is obviously the nicest grandma in the world with all the blood across her face like she just committed mass murder. Which she probably did in this case. In the end, Slitterhead may have some jank to it, and it definitely has places where it can improve, especially in some of the corners of gameplay and presentation. But it's also the prime example of a game not following a typical formula, and feeling a lot different yet familiar compared to other games, especially in the AAA space. The storytelling is fun, but also forces you to think and dig for answers, which more mainstream titles aren't doing lately. It actually asks you to come to your own conclusions at times. And I do my best to be as objective as possible in these reviews. But this one broke me a little bit. The idea that a game like Slitterhead took a lot more risks, in my opinion, and tried to find itself differently, and may not have fully succeeded, has some people calling it the worst game of the year. Really ends up bothering me. I mean, I can understand it's a game that can be heavily criticized for certain choices and it not being worth the price tag that it's at, in your opinion. I can understand not getting the story. But I'm going to bring that thumbnail back. If I were to talk to this reviewer, I know that you put that title up there only to get people to come to the video. You don't believe that. You know perfectly well there were much worse games this year, from all aspects, and that's even in the non-fully indie space. This race for clicks and over-exaggeration hurts gaming as a whole, and never allows a game to actually build upon itself if you just shit on it like that. Now look, we can have different opinions, but maybe we could be a little bit more constructive. Yes, don't recommend the game, but be like, okay, add this, do that, maybe change this up. Don't do that. And even with all that said, I still struggled with this scoring. The fact is that this game at the $50 price tag is a hard swallow for a lot of people out there, especially in the current economic environment. And yes, it does something new, it does something different in terms of some of the gameplay elements, but at 50 bucks, a lot of people are going to have trouble with it. That's in addition to the fact that I don't think the game gives you what you want in the 2-hour demo period if you were to buy it and then refund it on Steam if you didn't like it. The fact is, the game starts to pick up after you really understand the story, the gameplay, and some of the elements behind it. And the thing is that it is the perfect sale game. It's a game where if you could pick it up on sale, you're really going to love it because you'll feel like you're getting a bargain for all the different content, characters, and everything about it. But it's also a solid game. It's a game that I enjoyed from start to finish, even with the confusion that I had. Even with my struggles, I give the game an 82 out of 100. Making it a solid buy unless you're hurting for cash. Now, I always have my enhancer system, which takes the more subjective element of games and tries to match the game to you. And in case you haven't figured it out by this review, this is going to have a lot of enhancers. So if you fall into one of the following categories on screen strongly, add or subtract that score to the main score. If the first digit of your score changes, refer to this chart to see if the game lies in the buyability rating for you. And as you can see, even with a lot of the enhancers here, I think there's a lot of situations where a lot of people should try the game even at a very deep sale price. It is worth it. The fact is though, some people may want to buy it now, especially for the streaming audience. I do want to emphasize, this is the perfect game where you have some elements that will surprise you, but you can really work with your audience, talk about the game, what you think, especially if your audience hasn't been exposed to it. No, seriously, I know that's a lot to ask for some people out there, but really, it is. As you probably figured out by, well, this review as a whole, if you've gotten this far, I apologize for the lateness of this review. This one took a lot out of me in terms of not only getting through the story section without spoiling a lot while still talking about the story, which, by the way, Jesus Christ, that took a while. But the fact is that my emotions got the best of me in certain areas of this, and I had to step back at certain points. I try to be objective as possible, especially for the main parts of this review. But yeah, this one sort of irked certain elements of it. Now, I am going to try to get back on a normal review schedule, but considering I've said that for the last couple, I don't want to promise anything. I will be posting a schedule of what I plan to stream and what games I plan to review over the next few months after this video, probably in Discord and probably on the community page. So you can, check it out there. And if you like this type of content, hit that like button, subscribe, go follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever things. I'll probably put the links somewhere here. And as always, keep on gaming.